Well, Professor Chidi Odinkalu joins us now, and he is, as you've seen there, former chairman, governing council of the National Human Rights Commission, and also current president of Unity Schools Old Students Association.
Old school, new ideas, yes.
Was that the reason you refused to write your state of origin?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. You don't want to identify with any state?
I come from Nigeria.
But you must come from somewhere in Nigeria.
There are naturalized Nigerians. I was listening to Peter and laughing. Where does this guy come up? There are Nigerians who are actually just Nigerians. Look, the Zards.
Don't they have to claim a state?
The Zards have been in Nigeria since 1912. They came from Lebanon.
So don't they claim a state here in Nigeria?
You don't have to claim any state to be a naturalized Nigerian.
Just wondering. I mean, they must say they stayed somewhere, they lived somewhere.
This is the thing. You know, people think we all get planted in places and we must always be looking back and never be looking forward. The Supreme Court decided in 1985 in the case of Olowu v. Olowu that you can actually transplant yourself. Okay? That was a case of a man who was born in Ife, ended up dying in Benin, where he had lived for over 50 years, and regarded himself as a Benin person. Okay? And they said he had to distribute his assets according to the laws of Ife people. And he said, no, I want to distribute it according to the laws of Benin people. And for that, his estate had to foot legal costs to the Supreme Court. Why? Because we actually think we are planted in one place and we can never relocate. And that is just destructive, because the thing that makes you productive in life is mobility, factor mobility, mobility of labor, mobility of capital, mobility of title, mobility of information. If you are immobile, you are unproductive. And it is this state of origin nonsense that makes us unproductive, because it makes us immobile.
Well, an interesting concept there, but let's talk about the issue at hand. You have made a video which has now been widely publicized as to the effects that this bill, this controversial bill seeking to attempt to regulate NGOs could have. What precisely do you have against it? Because some people say you are being alarmist.
Let me also say this, talking about alarms. Peter also said something here about the event of 25th of July, the so-called interaction that he had. I was supposed to chair that interaction. Yes? Now, what he didn't tell you is that he came there with heavies who were supposed to keep out people they didn't like. He sat down there and decided that my views were not welcome, and views of people like me were not welcome, and that I could not be fair-minded in moderating a conversation on this subject matter. And his heavies were instructed to keep me out.
Was that the impression that you got?
That was what transpired. Because he says I stormed out. No, I did not actually. The heavies, these bodyguards that they brought there were the people that actually told me I couldn't go in. So let's just get facts right.
Not because you didn't feel your state of origin.
After that, I actually went on to try to get in. The bodyguards threw me out. That is fact. I'm not imagining this. Okay?
Okay.
I actually have an account of what transpired, written contemporaneously. So now, you ask yourself the question, why would you have an interaction with Nigerian citizens on things that affect them and bring bodyguards to throw Nigerians out in their own country? Number two, he talks about this being about trying to keep away terrorists and foreign whatever. Yes? This interaction was paid for by an American organization. Yes? He is concerned about his interaction of 25th of July was paid for by an American organization that he, Peter, allowed to collect information about Nigerians, including state of origin. And I asked my friends, the Americans, why do you come to my country to collect state of origin information? If I attended this meeting in your country, would you be collecting state of origin information? Peter doesn't care about Nigerians. I do.
No, isn't that the reason why we should have something to regulate what it is that
Let me finish.
non-governmental
These
organizations
people,
can collect
I'm telling
and
you the
cannot
story.
collect?
These guys don't care about our country. We do. Because if he did, he would have been asking the Americans the question I was the only person that was willing to ask.
No,
That is,
are we not used to that already?
I'm not used to it.
Some people will say
Americans are
that
not going to come to my country.
Nigerians feel it in government forms. They feel it when they're about to enter the primary school. They feel it when they are even going to unity schools. It is a basis upon which you get a quota to enter the school. You cannot say that because you're going to enter a unity school, I'm not going to feel I'm a Nigerian.
Americans come to...
I'm asking, isn't that the reality?
Americans come to my country to administer quotas, correct?
Perhaps not, but maybe they want to see what the spread is like.
I'm telling you the story as it is. Now, if you're an American or a Brit or European, you're coming to my country, you can talk about address. You can talk about residence, because that is what happens in your country. But you cannot come to Nigeria and become Federal Character Commission. No. But let me address your question about me being alarmist. It is because of the kinds of things people like my good brother Peter have said here this morning. Now, so he's concerned about terrorist organizations, correct?
Aren't you?
Oh, all of us are. We all are. Okay. Now, in 2011, the federal government set up the Gaji-Galtimari panel into the insecurity in the Northeast. The Gaji-Galtimari panel reported in September 2011. And what they found was that the people who were sponsoring Boko Haram were in government. They were in politics. They were identified. There was a white paper issued on the Gaji-Galtimari committee report. Nobody has been brought to book. Those people are still there in government. Now, people will come and bring up all this red herring about civil society terrorists, and you really want to believe it. Yes? But that is not just nonsense, it is certifiable nonsense. And I'll ask you the question. If there is a responsible government and it actually has evidence that people are masquerading as civil society to perpetrate terrorist activities, what would it do? Would it not shut them down? You need a new law to shut them down? Is that exactly the point? That does not make sense. If you look at the criminal code, the penal code, the corporate affairs, the Companies and Allied Matters Act, and so many other pieces of legislation I could recite to you, they are very clear. And the provisions are more than sufficient. I'm not even talking about the TPA of 2011 amended in 2013, the Terrorism Prevention Act. They are so clear. We don't need to be in this territory. The problem we have is very simple. When a country in which people don't want to implement laws, and they think piping up more totalitarian laws on top of existing totalitarianisms and dysfunctions is the best way to run the country. It isn't. Building a country is not easy. It requires hard work. There are no shortcuts to it. What do you need to do? Apply the laws that exist. There are too many of them. And the idea that somehow the area of our civics is so unregulated, we need this piece of totalitarian nonsense to deal with it, is just illiteracy. The laws are too many. And I'm not before the Companies and Allied Matters Act, we had the Land Perpetual Succession Act. The Companies and Allied Matters Act amended that. We have the Federal Inland Revenue Service Act. We've got the National Planning Commission Act, right? We've got the Value Added the Tax Act. And we've got so many other laws. I'm not even talking about the EFCC and SCUMO. We deal with money laundering, or the BOFIA, we deal with, that is Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act. We deal with everybody who has to deal with the financial system. But the laws are too many. How do you put together a piece of legislation that expropriates all the existing powers of all existing bodies? CBN, Customs and Excise, Immigration, Corporate Affairs Commission, National Planning Commission, all of them have their powers expropriated and put in this law, in this bill, and somehow that is supposed to be right.
So doesn't it make it easier for the NGOs then? I mean, instead of having to know what all of these laws stipulate, you just have what you should, I mean, the act that guides you in one place, and you know
doesn't work like
what is stipulated, and you stay within it.
It doesn't work like that. The idea that somehow one piece of legislation is a Dr. Cure-all for everything has never happened and cannot happen. And there's a reason for that. Government is organic, okay? If you need to bring in goods, they have to go through customs and excise. What are you going to do? Have NGO commission dealing with customs and excise? If you need to bring in foreign expertise, you will need a visa. What do you need to do? Place an NGO regulatory commission person at all our visa places across the world? It doesn't work like that. So there is a good reason for that. Now, the other thing is that people actually think that civil society, the point actually of the video is to educate people about what civil society is. Because a lot of people think it's people like me. Whatever you do in this law will not, because I'm properly lawyered up for what I do. It's not about people like me. This is about those people who are doing good in our communities and are actually affecting lives, but will be sent to jail with laws like this.
Do you think that they're the targets? Because some people might say,
yes.
I mean, you talked about churches and mosques in that video,
yes.
and some people might say that that definitely cannot be the target, because if there's anything that we know that the National Assembly, government organizations avoid religion like the plague. So why do you think that they would try to regulate in any way at all religious activities or religious houses?
Now, it's very interesting because Peter did not deny that when he came here. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that actually that's what the law does. Now, this law, it's amazing, actually, that people put together words without reading them. Because if anybody had read what they put together in that draft, they'd be a lot more circumspect and a lot more careful. But why do we do this kind of thing? Because we are used to military rule.